Special edition of Red Pill News. As always, my name is Zach Payne, the corruption detector, and joining me today, as he does every month, my good friend Colin Plume from Noble Gold Investments. Colin, it's so good to see you, buddy. Welcome back to the show.
Good to see you. As my father says, it's good to be seen because he's 80. So he loves that joke, and it's true, right? I mean, you know, every day you wake up is a blessed day. So I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So it's since the last time you were on the show, obviously a lot has happened. We had these deadlines kind of come and go with Trump's tariffs. And in a manner of speaking, the changes that they were meant to affect have already begun, right? Because as soon as he announced them, Mexico and Canada both played hardball. They said, absolutely not. We're not going to capitulate. But then within 24 hours, they both said, we're going to do whatever it is that you want us to do so that we don't have to submit to these things. And even given those things, Trump has still said, thank you very much. We're still going to put those tariffs on you. And clearly in the mainstream media, they would like to blame everything that we see in the financial markets and in the consumer markets on the effects of these tariffs. But a lot of this stuff has just been kind of waiting in the wings to catch up with the American people. And now, obviously, we're in a bit of a pickle. What is your opinion on the state of this nation when it comes to the tariffs and how they're ultimately going to affect the American people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial idea is to tighten up the borders. Yeah. And, you know, he's talked about a lot about fentanyl coming in and, you know, trying to block that. But it's not just that. I mean, I think when you look at the numbers of the amount of illegals that are coming into the country, 10, 15 million, somewhere in that range, maybe 20, you know, who knows what it is.
I had no idea.
A lot of what the economy has been, and this is why there's going to be pain for a while, Zach, is that a lot of our economy the last 2 years was really based on so much government spending and allocation there that it was keeping a lot of the things that you would think that we wouldn't really need. And now with Doge, it's starting to come out. So for instance, like, you know, when you look at, you know, each illegal coming over, how much money we lose and we spend, money that gets funneled through a WHO, and let's just say 150 to 200,000 per person coming through. So if you look at 10, 15 million, I mean, we're talking about, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, plus all the jobs that are surrounded, all the government jobs. And we know now that our unemployment numbers were completely skewed because of these things. So we had a tremendous amount of government spending that Biden kept going for the last 2 years that we're starting to unwind. And that's a big part of the reason that we're seeing things start to pull back. The tariffs look on face value to hurt, but in some ways what we're doing is we're tightening the borders to reduce a lot of that government spending that we end up having to do. The government spending comes after the people are here, right? And so it's such a dramatic amount of spending that us being able to tighten things up and then not having to spend all that money, it really helps us long term. Now, short term, it hurts us because there's so many areas and there's so many jobs that are going to be lost. Yeah. And, you know, in the end, they'll be good, but there's no net positive to a lot of those jobs. So,
well, you mentioned the federal jobs. I mean, you've also got all of those NGO jobs, and then so much. We have no idea how much of that money going into these NGOs is then funneled outward once again into a variety of other smaller nonprofits and NGOs, which are spending money, you know, here or abroad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We don't really know. And so even though Canada and Mexico have said we're willing to work through these things, I think at this point it seems like the tariffs are going to stick for some time period, which means, you know, the effect of that is that we will have some pain on and some of the items that we're buying day to day, you know, from automobiles to to day-to-day items have all gone up in cost. Computer costs are going to go up, to buy a computer here. I mean, you could go down the list. A lot of the items are going to get more expensive, and that should put an emphasis on corporations starting to buy here. Also, maybe it triggers people to start thinking like, maybe I should buy locally. The downside of all of these things is that it has created the consumer sentiment, is that you're changing the mindset of the consumer.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were just like, oh, this is a good price, I'm going to buy it. Now the consumer is starting to have to think about where they're buying and what they're buying.
Not such a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, but it takes time.
It does,
right?
yeah.
That's the whole thing is, you have to think about these changes. They take time. It's one of those things that just doesn't happen overnight. I do this thing every year for my kids' school where they do a Shark Tank. These sixth graders have to come up with a product, and they have 1 week to come up with a product, a business plan, and then they present it to the sharks. And I'm one of the sharks, and there's like 5 entrepreneurs there. And before the first time I did it, every year, this was like 3 years ago, every kid, they had their product, and then they literally said verbatim the same thing. And we're going to make our product in China because we're going to save 50 or 60%. And literally every team said that, right? And my first year in, I said, as a judge, I said, as an American business owner, I don't love hearing that you guys are defaulting to China.
No.
And it really, like, I actually had a vet in the back start like clapping, and he came up to me after, and he's like, I'm so glad you said that, because every team kept mentioning, like, we're going to make it in Vietnam, we're going to make it here, and it doesn't, create an economy that's really good for us. So this year I coached them on that. And someone asked the question about where's the product made, and the team said, we've decided that we want to be an American-made product. And people were like cheering. They were like so happy to hear this. So what I'm saying is that it's just going to take time. And also the buyer initially is going to have to get used to the fact that product may cost a little bit more, but it's made here in the US. Yep. So none of these things are going to come quickly. And I think that when you look at, everyone's starting to shift, right? Because you have like Jamie Dimon, for instance, he's supporting the tariffs. He's come out, he believes in it. He knows it's going to cause inflation. He knows it's expensive, but big CEO Chase supporting it. Steel tariffs up 24%. Cost of steel is going up. Just a lot of these aluminum prices, a lot of these things are going to be more expensive for a while. And we have to get used to that. And obviously the stock market has reacted completely negatively to this. And the NASDAQ's lost $1 trillion in value. S&P is down. I mean, every stock market is down from, where it was a few months ago. So that is some of the effect, the short-term effect of what's happening.
And I think most people understand that that's a necessary byproduct of transitioning us back into an economy that serves its people. People have gotten pretty spoiled over the last several decades. I mean, the idea of going to Walmart and just getting like the cheapest possible example of whatever it is that you're looking to get, likely because you're not making as much money because you've lost your job at a manufacturing place. Now you're working in a service-based job. You're not producing anything, so you must buy the cheapest possible thing. And I've bristled at the idea that we couldn't do what we're doing right now for the longest time because of that necessary pain that we have to go through. I mean, if we're going to transition our economy into an economy that begins to produce things again, then we have to understand that there is going to be a period of time where we must adjust to it. And, I look at the consumer sentiment out there and the sentiment regarding President Trump. His approval and the direction of the country has skyrocketed literally
Yes.
since he came into office. And the approval ratings, the people who believe that the other side are doing something that is good for America, I mean, it's like single digits. I mean, it's like the lowest number of people is since 1992, since Bill Clinton came into office. And, you know, I mean, how ironic, Bill Clinton with NAFTA pretty much destroyed the American manufacturing base and sold us out to the Chinese. So you know, it is going to be difficult. But we have to go through it. We have to be willing to do it. You know, I mean, I've done it in my life before. I mean, I think many people have. If we got to tighten our belts, we got to tighten our belts.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and there's things that will happen that seem counterintuitive to what we want. For instance, you know, all the airline stocks are way down. And, you know, a big part of why the airline stocks are down is because you're looking at a scenario where so much of that flying was consultants or people that were doing government jobs. And so they're anticipating that sector having 40, 50% pullbacks. So there's going to be some repercussions to some of the things that are happening. Now, could that mean prices of airline tickets go down a little bit? Maybe. I think some people would love that idea. Maybe prices have to come down. Maybe there's an opportunity to fly a little bit less. I mean, as I've been looking at airline prices, they've really skyrocketed. So maybe there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
And I think that people will take advantage of that. I also think people will travel more domestically, and which happened after 2008 and 2009 too, after the economic collapse in 2008 and 2009, is that a lot of the cities that realize, like, hey, if people aren't going to fly to Europe anymore, they're not going to go overseas, they just can't afford it right now, let's make our city more desirable. And so you have all of these small, Montgomery, Alabama, Charleston, you know, these cities were really born from a tourist point of view, 2008, 2009. Charleston was before that, but I mean, they really started to put an emphasis. So, you know, I think we're going to start to see more people, you know, go maybe an hour or 2 or 3 hours, or just go state to state, as opposed to going overseas, which is also a benefit to us. It's
Certainly
keeping more of that, keeping more of that money here in the U.S. But all of these things, you know, are gonna take some change. And you know, while this is all happening, Europe is, you know, they're doing tariffs on our goods that we're shipping overseas. They're still moving forward with their BRICS, you know, and getting a gold-backed currency, and you know, they're moving away from U.S. So there's the positive for us. We're still at odds with what's happening in the world, and the world is still concerned about us, but we're moving in a much better direction. I think ultimately what we're going to see is what I expect to see is that the 10-year is going to continue to go. 10-year Treasury is going to come down. Inflation at some point in the next 2 to 3 years will eventually slow down. And then that will be a way that we can sort of help the real estate market come back, is that we can get that 10-year down, which is based, you know, the 10-year Treasury is based on what the 30-year mortgage is. If we can get that down into the, you know, high 4s, 5s, then I think we can salvage something in the real estate market, which is obviously having tremendous problems right now. January was the slowest month for residential sales in terms of transactions than we've seen in, I think, 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, I can say certainly down here in Florida, Lisa is a realtor, okay? You know, and so, I mean, she's seen that firsthand down here in Florida. For the last several years, I mean, it was like you couldn't put a house on sale and keep it on the market. And right now, all around here, you've got all of this new construction. Builders came in and they just, you know, sucked up the lots. They put houses out there. And I mean, they've been sitting here unsold in my neighborhood for the last 8 months, you know, and that's unheard of around here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you have to look at it's a combination of we obviously need new housing, and there's still a dramatic need for new housing. But the question is that at what cost, and how much can people afford?
Yeah.
And, you know, with rates in the 6s right now, double where it was, you know, 3 years ago, it presents a pretty difficult situation. And coupled with the fact that you look at the insurance costs on a homestay, they've skyrocketed, energy costs, they've skyrocketed. So the day-to-day of owning a home is less attractive than it's been in a very long time. And that's why people continue to rent. because they just feel like it's a better opportunity. They have more flexibility. So they need to, President Trump, that is one big hurdle for him, is he needs to figure out a way to make it more entry level, make it a way where people can afford to get in. He needs to create an incentive for builders, because the builders are going to slow down too. So this is one of the big things he can tackle. But I think if he can get the interest rates down through one measure or another, it'll open up the floodgates for buying. But I've never seen anything like it. My neighborhood's the same thing. I mean, it's just for sale, for sale, for sale. No one's coming. So it's a pretty interesting situation and a difficult situation. Lots of realtor friends. The numbers say that last year, I think over 60% of realtors didn't even make a sale last year. So that industry is really struggling too. So it's I think it's we have a retraction. We're having cuts. We're learning how the new world is going to be. And then, obviously gold broke its all-time high of 3,000, which
Yes.
I've been saying for, I knew 2,000, the fact that it was below 1,800, 1,900, 2 years ago, didn't make any sense for the pricing. It had been kind of hovering there for a while. But obviously it just blew through 2,000, and now we're hovering at around $3,000 an ounce, which I think, people are surprised. If you're not in the gold market, you're surprised. But
Yep.
if you see the demand, our demand has just been through the roof. The demand makes sense. I mean, we're really selling a tremendous amount. With the tariffs, a lot of people have been moving gold from overseas, moving it back here to the U.S. There's obviously been this talk about auditing Fort Knox, which
I was going to say, we haven't even had a chance to talk about that yet.
it's unbelievable that, something that I've wanted. I've been in the business, the gold business, for 16 years, and it's been something I've always wanted to see happen. I mean, Ron Paul would talk about it. It's like, how can't we just go in and see how much gold we have? Like, why wouldn't we want to know what we have? There's all these rumors that we don't have any. And so Elon Musk started a X post. It caught fire. And then him and President Trump basically said, yeah, we need to go in there and see if there's any gold in there. And so they haven't set a date. I think there was a date, and they may have changed it, but there's some significant talk that they're going to go in and audit Fort Knox and see how much gold we have, and then obviously revalue it to today. Because I don't know if you're aware, but
$42.
$42. Yeah, exactly. So it's at $42. The last time they did a partial audit was 1974. They haven't done a full audit in 50 years.
Yes.
And
even in 1974, it was like it was the trash gold that they allowed people to see. It was the gold that had been melted down, that they had taken from people under FDR, basically, in the coin form. Yeah. And what they weighed was not the actual weight that it was supposed to be. Like, it was less, and there were all these variances, and they were doing it on a kitchen scale as they held it in the air. It was just absurd.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is, if you go back even farther, we did another audit in 1941. And in 1941, we had over 20,000 tons of gold. So when we went to the Bretton Woods Exchange in 1944, we had 80% of the world's gold. So we were the obvious choice to be the world's reserve currency. Mm-hmm. So in 1944, we become the world's reserve currency. Then we do the audit in 1974, and we have 8,144 tons of gold. Where do the 12,000 tons of gold go? There's nowhere to be found.
Why would you even ask, Colin?
Yeah, exactly. So, and the fact that people weren't like shocked and disappointed in 1974 also is quite telling.
Yes.
I mean, there's nowhere you can find where that gold went. So when people say like, oh, they definitely have the gold there, it was like, well, they sold 12,000 tons over 30 years. They didn't tell anybody. Like, why wouldn't they just sell this gold or lease it or whatever? So I think the idea that we're going to do this and finally get some exposure to the gold and what the gold that we own as Americans. I mean, we all own some of it. I mean, it's, compared to our debt, it's not enough, but ultimately this is one of the only assets we own that doesn't have any debt behind it.
Yep. Yeah. So it's comical to me when people will say, you know, politicians in the modern day say, oh, you know, we already did the audit in 1974, and we've already talked about, you know, how, you know, ridiculous that audit was. It wasn't even really an audit. And they say, just trust me. I know it's there. Okay, well, you know, a lot can happen in the last 50 years. And there have been so many reports of gold being snuck out of Fort Knox under the cover of darkness. And as you said, there is absolutely no record keeping as to what happened to that gold, when it left. And they would have us believe that it's just there and we should just trust them. I mean, it sure feels to me like the people who know there's no gold there, or at least not enough gold, don't want the world to know, because if that were to be the case, if they open up Fort Knox and it's empty, I mean, what would that do to our currency? What would that do to the financial markets? I mean, it would be catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, when they did the audit in 74, the dollar dropped too. And then we saw what happened in the early 80s, where you had, you know, gold go on a massive run. The dollar lost a lot of value. When we, you know, got off the gold standard in 1933, the dollar lost value. So anytime you find out there's less gold, or you're recalibrating, it's obviously going to have a negative effect on the dollar. And you know, that's really the thing that you and I have talked about for many years, is that the world is, you know, moving away from the dollar as quickly as it can. I mean, de-dollarization is, BRICS is talking about it, Russia's talking about it. I mean, you name the countries, they're all talking about. Europe's talking, even France, the president, you know, President of France has talked about it many times, that you know, they're moving away from, they're divesting from the dollar. It's a very consistent theme that's happening in the world. So it's, you know, the thing that this is all what was laid out for President Trump to try to fight, is that we've had this ballooning debt, dollar that, you know, is not as desired in the world, a currency that's not as desired, too many government jobs. So, you know, when people say, like, you know, when are things going to turn around, and it's impossible to have any realistic timeline. But I think that the thing that people need to keep in mind is that we are going to see the equity markets be bumpy for a while, because we're making so many significant changes. And so people that are like really close to retirement are really, you know, focused in on this. For people that are younger, they have more of a timeline. But anyone that's like retired or 2 or 3 years, it's concerning if that's where you have, you know, a lot of your net worth. And that's why I think being diversified is really important, especially in today's day and age, because we are going to go through a few years of a bumpy road. And I truly do believe that they you know, Biden wasn't able to announce it because he was able to keep a lot of the spending hidden and a lot of the jobs hidden under, you know, the government. But we've been in a recession for a few years. Now we're seeing it because we're opening it up. But if you looked at all the money that we gave, you know, illegals coming into the country, if you looked at all the government jobs, you looked at all the spending, you looked at all this Doge that we're finding, we were just repurposing money. We were just creating more debt and repurposing it through the government to make it look like our economy was much stronger. And I believe he did that to try to get reelected.
I think you're right. It's kind of like the modern day equivalent of FDR's New Deal spending package, like the Civilian Conservation Corps. You know, he just like hired people to dig ditches and stuff like that. And that was basically what kept the country going during that time. A couple of things, something you said earlier, and I hadn't thought about it until recently, but I don't know how often you've flown throughout the last 4 years, but I do these conferences all around the country about 4 times a year. And every single flight during the Biden administration, I noticed this uptick in what was very obviously essentially illegals filling the empty seats on the plane, and maybe even filling up the plane before Americans had a chance to buy tickets. And, you know, they were people who were clearly, you know, just like coming with the clothing on their back, didn't speak English, variety of different ages, sometimes unaccompanied migrant children. And what gave it away every time is that they didn't have to pass TSA scrutiny. They would just get shoved right through TSA. And at so many different airports, I'd have to go up, I'd have to show my ID. These people would just flash a travel voucher and they would just send them right through. I'd have to scan my iris oftentimes going through airports. These people,
Right.
they could be anybody.
Yeah.
Clearly those people were flying with government paid travel vouchers. And I would not be surprised if that was, one of those things that you mentioned there, to a large degree, keeping the airline industry afloat. And then, of course, they make tickets for us more expensive because if we want to get on a plane that leaves at a decent time or is going to arrive at a decent time, then we're going to have to pay a premium to do so. But there was something else. The COVID era policy of the federal government paying people's mortgage payments if they were going to go into default, that only just recently ended. And so, I mean, it's kind of like in California, how up until very recently, you couldn't evict anybody because of the pandemic. And so a lot of people were just like, I'm surprised that the rental market didn't collapse completely and that a lot of landlords didn't just get put into bankruptcy because, how are they supposed to just continue to pay the note on properties if they're not getting any income coming in? I don't know how that works, but I mean, my question ultimately is with this, the money no longer flowing into the mortgage industry and the rental markets, how is that going to affect things going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at charts across the country that show that, a lot of places mortgages like 1 month away or 2 months away from default. Depending on the city, we're anywhere from like 15 to 20% of people are like basically 1 to 2 months away from a potential default, which means they're already paying late or they're not paying their full mortgage. There's some charts online that are looking at that data and spending that, and it's across the board. I mean, there's no place that isn't affected by this. They're all having those issues. Some of the more expensive places are obviously they have more potential for these situations. But yeah, I mean, we're not prepared for another bailout. We can't bail homeowners out, especially in this situation, and the banks can't really afford to do it either because. They can't take those loans back and resell them in today's environment. They're not available. And because the housing market is so slow, they're not going to be able to. So they're really trying to work with these landlords to keep them in, to keep them paying because they're not in a position. The only way that would work is we'd have to see another 2008 and 2009 situation where the government just goes in and gives these banks all this money. That's the only way this situation works. So, yeah, we've created this bubble, this housing bubble with the debt and also creating a situation where we just never got it to normal rates. I mean, even though I wish rates get lower, and to be honest, right now, today, these are probably the rates that should have been around for a long time. Historically, 6% mortgage is still low, right? I mean, we got used to 3%. We got used to 4%. But if you actually go back before 2001, 6% is historically would be lower. I think the average before 2001 was anywhere from 7 to 10%.
Wow.
So we just created a situation that was not a real situation for the housing market to help continue to boost. And then there's so many people around the housing market that just make so much money on just, selling loans, repackaging loans. I mean, you look at so many of the billionaires are in the loan business, and a lot of it is just this frothy where people would just every 2 years just refinance, and there's fees and fees. So now we're sort of in a normal environment, but this normal environment is not sustainable. And then I think that what it comes down to is most of the home prices across the country are probably 30 to 40% overpriced.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what happens there? If that's the true number, how do we keep everybody on a level? Like, why would people continue to pay a mortgage when I'm going to be able to pick up the house next door, a brand new one, for 30% less? Who cares if the mortgage rate is higher?
Yeah.
I'll just dump my house and, pick it up. So I think we're in a very difficult situation where, equity markets are rocky, real estate is not looking great. And so where do people put their money? And I think that's why you've seen, gold futures right now, long gold on the stock market is like 65% of the market. So that means that, hedge funds, endowments, they're looking long gold. They're like liking the price of gold. Even at now at 3,000, they're thinking longer, 2-3 years down the road. They're really buying and holding. And I think this is sort of the sentiment, is that like nobody knows what's happening. The house is falling. And so they're trying to get into things that feel safe and good. And that's why gold has really kind of purposely gone up. I think that it's just the inevitable in a 1 to 2 year cycle that you're going to need some safety investments.
Yeah.
And that's why long gold. I mean, you could look at all the sentiment out there. People can Google this stuff too, but it's a very telling time for the gold market. And then, silver still. Obviously, in my book, I talk a lot about it.
Mm-hmm.
Silver's still below its all-time high. We're sitting at $33 today. It's starting to creep a little bit, but we haven't seen that kind of massive bull run in silver that a lot of people are anticipating.
So, and obviously the administration is openly flirting for the first time, I think, seriously, with the idea of going back on the gold standard for the dollar.
Right.
And I would hope that the audit of Fort Knox would result in something like that, so that, we can say, okay, obviously we've got to repeg the amount of gold that we have in our reserves. It has to be the current market value. That's going to dramatically upset the situation with the debt and the deficit. And it would also, I would imagine, increase the value of the dollar. And it would probably make it easier for us to do business and both compete with the BRICS nations. Because if we're all
Correct.
dealing with a gold-backed currency, we'd have some sort of reciprocity in value. And obviously, Donald Trump seems to be normalizing relations with a lot of these countries that have been working to upset that balance that we have on the global stage.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, he's a deal maker, and I think business-wise, he's thinking that he's trying to set a standard of what we'll accept as a country, and that's why he's come out aggressive in a lot of these tariffs and kind of set the table for what he's looking to do. But at the end of the day, he wants deals, he wants trade. He knows we need to continue to trade. He knows we need to sell goods overseas. Part of us, the dollar dropping right now, the value of the dollar, things in the temporary, is that it makes our goods more desirable overseas. If the dollar is lower, then our goods are more desirable. If we get inflation down a little bit, the 10-year drops. I think it's part of a bigger plan to eventually get rates for the country down. I mean, listen, I've talked a lot about real estate, but obviously having lower rates helps businesses too. A lot of businesses are living on debt or borrowing to buy equipment or to add resources or do R&D. So there's a lot of people that get affected by having lower debt. So yeah, I think it's a strong thing. And that's part of the reason, at Noble Gold, this month we have we switched we were doing silver, but now we're doing a gold promotion. So anybody that, is watching that wants to get we have where you get some free gold with the purchase. We've switched it up. So we're doing 1 10th-ounce gold American Eagles this month. So anyone that's, doing any kind of IRA or any kind of qualified purchase, that's why we've kind of transitioned into gold, because it seems like gold's going to go on a run here for the next few months. And so that's the forefront of one of our promotions. Absolutely.
And anybody who wants to get into that, we've got the phone number on screen. The phone number and the link are in the description below. It's Noble Gold Investments at RedPill78Gold.com. Definitely check it out. Give them a call. You guys have call centers here in America. You've got American English speakers, native English speakers working there.
Yes. Yeah. All ages, all demographic, all different types of people willing to. And we really focus on customer service. That's what we do. You're going to talk to a live person. It's going to be a fun conversation. They're going to give you a lot of information. Everybody there owns gold and silver. They all have it, they all store it, they all believe in it. We have really interesting staff. So if you're looking to build a relationship and learn, that's really how we do business. It's not a transactional type of purchase with us. We really stay along for the long haul. And as things change and evolve, we're going to be there too. And when you're ready to sell down the road, we buy it back from you. So if you're looking to build a relationship with somebody in the space, that's really what we focus on.
All right. Well, Colin, as always, I really appreciate you being here today, buddy. Enjoyed the conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's happening, because there are big things on the horizon, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks, Zach. Talk to you soon.
All right, brother. We'll see you next time.